Welcome to C-Level Leadership. I'm Darren Mell. I'm not a CEO, and that's the point. These conversations are about leading from the middle, where trust, empathy, and real work actually happen. Thanks for listening.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of C-Level Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Darren Mell. And this one, I wanted to take a moment as leaders to talk about it from more of a human perspective. And I wrote a chapter in the book that I published called C-Level Leadership, SEA, Levels Leadership. And it was called Anchor Moments When Leadership and Life Collide. And what I want you to know is that I am a self-published author. So most of my works are on Apple, Barnes & Noble, Google Books, and Amazon. But one of the cool things you can do as self-publish is you can update your work. And a lot of this came to me new for the first time. Did most of my writing last year in 2025. But in updating my work, I updated the C-Level Leadership book with this particular chapter for a reason that's very personal to me. And I thought about this and I thought about, like, do other leaders, how do they deal with this when this is happening? But let me get into it, and I think it'll make more sense to you. And it's more about just understanding that we're humans too, even though we're responsible for other people as leaders. You know, there are moments in life when life decides to remind you that leadership isn't just a metaphor. It's literally a balancing act in the high seas. And for myself, this came crashing down towards the end of 2025 in September, when my wife of 28 years was diagnosed with breast cancer. And even saying this feels like I've kind of punctured the computer monitor screen in front of me. You know, it's personal, it's heavy, it's real. It's also proof that the human side of leadership, the part that I've spent chapters exploring and writing about and coming up with a cute title for, it isn't theoretical, because empathy and strength aren't learned during calm waters. They're forged when the waves knock the compass out of your hand. And a lot of this is analogies related to the sea because it makes sense with this. But you know, when the doctor called, you know, everything normal about life became, well, it wasn't normal. Suddenly the simple routines like making coffee, driving somewhere, writing a book, it all had gravitational weight to me. Meetings and metrics didn't vanish. But they blurred around the edges. My work calendar got tangled with scan appointments and appointments for my wife and treatment schedules and what was going on with her. And through all of that, and we're still fighting it right now, as I talk to you in 2026, leadership doesn't stop. Because here's the thing, we don't get to hit pause on being a leader while life is happening. We learn how to captain the ship differently. One day you're coaching a team member through a tough quarter. The next you're sitting at a hospital waiting room trying to look brave while you're scrolling through Slack or Microsoft Teams and answering back for work. I've been fortunate that I work in a remote role, so I've been able to be home with my wife. But the contrast of this is stunning. And yet it's oddly affirming. The qualities I've been preaching, empathy, perspective, patience, suddenly they weren't concepts, they were survival mechanisms for me. Leadership, I've learned, is deeply personal. The more real life gets, the more real your leadership must become. And, you know, there's a strange parallel between leadership under pressure and caring for someone through an illness. They both require calm. Even when your insides are swirling like a blender, you learn to breathe differently. You choose your words carefully. You find strength in small victories, like laughter sneaking through where you'd least expect it. My wife and I, we joke a lot, you know, because humor is often our sort of flotation device. Sometimes it's dark humor, sometimes it's silly, but it's ours. It's the same mechanism that diffuses tension in team meetings works at home too. Because, in my opinion, humor doesn't erase pain, it oxygenates it. It gives you breadth of perspective in a suffocating situation. I got to tell you, this experience has changed how I lead. I no longer, end meetings without asking people how they're really doing. And if they say good, I dig deeper, because sometimes good can sometimes mean that they're barely hanging on. And I can't tell you, when you've created an environment with the current team that I work with now, I haven't even met most of them in person yet because it's a remote role and it's a global company. But the outpouring of support that I've gotten from them, and they've never met me in person or even met my wife. And I think comes back to us as leaders, is you get that type of empathy back from the people you lead if you set up an environment that lets empathy breathe and make people feel comfortable in talking to you about that. Something shifted in me through all this relentless drive, the goals, the dashboards, they're still there, but they've taken their rightful seat behind humanity. My team doesn't need an unbreakable leader. They need a real one who knows when to push, when to pause, and when to say, go spend time with your family. The spreadsheet will wait. And this past year has taught me that the most, at sea level leaders, they're not the ones who stand tall in front of storms. It's the ones who know when to kneel beside their crew, sort of acknowledging the pain without letting it define them, who understand that vulnerability doesn't undermine authority, it deepens it. At home, I'm learning some similar lessons. When treatments roughen the days, I lead by just being there, quiet, steady, imperfectly present. Love and leadership overlap more than most of us want to admit. In both, consistency is care. And, I used to think that anchoring meant holding firm. But now I know that anchors aren't meant to keep you stuck. They're meant to keep you steady enough to survive the chaos. And anchors are the people who show up when they don't have to. The laughs between the chemo sessions, the friends who text at exactly the right time, the coworkers who say, don't worry, we've got this, and they actually mean it. In leadership, anchors show up as culture. The trust you've built in calm waters becomes your safety net when the storm comes. I've seen as leaders the small acts like remembering a birthday, checking in after a tough week, sending a note that says, thinking of you. Those are the real, the ballast to the anchor. So this is what I've realized in going through this. Empathy isn't something you toggle on and off depending on the moment. It's really the anchor you carry every day, because someday you're probably going to need it yourself. And I had not had anyone in my family that had cancer before, and I feel like I'm a fairly empathetic person. But until you've gone through it, you just can't put yourself in their shoes. But boy, do I understand it now. And then wrapping this up, talking about sort of the eye of this storm, I wish I could say I've mastered this balance, that I've got my routine perfectly calibrated between caregiver, career, and creative output. I haven't. Some days I'm strong. Some days I'm shattered. This has been really hard. But every day I'm learning that leading doesn't mean hiding the hurt. It means modeling how to keep moving through it with purpose, humor, and heart. And if leadership has taught me anything, it's that there's a beauty in the mess, a grace in the chaos, and courage in simply showing up, especially when you'd rather not. Life and leadership, they collide for all of us eventually. And when they do, the right response isn't to escape the storm, and in my opinion, it's to steer through it. And sometimes to drop anchor, hold your loved ones tight, and just let the waves roll over for a bit is probably the better way to go. And I just wanted to touch on that today as a leader. And I've always said jokingly that what goes on behind our Zoom screens is real life, and the rest of it is just what we do to provide for our families. And I hope that you, as a leader, understood kind of where I was coming through on this. I would love what you have to say, and if you've been through tough times and how you manage when sometimes your life is chaotic, but you still have to get the job done. As always, I greatly appreciate you listening to the C-Level Leadership Podcast, and that is SEA. My name is Darren Mell, Average Human Being. We'll talk to you next time.
This has been C-Level Leadership with Darren Mell, Average Human Being. Thanks for listening.